To me, Parasite Eve is the perfect example of a late 90s Squaresoft game. They had all of that post-Final Fantasy VII money, and they used it to throw at pretty much every idea that they could think of, and most of it worked. The amount of weird crap in this game, both mechanically and in the story and characters, is just ridiculous. But somehow it worked for me, and the whole time I was playing, I found myself wishing that games today would experiment like this and take these kinds of risks. But that's for a whole other video. This video is another episode of Remake, Reboot, or Retire, and today we're talking about Parasite Eve. Alright, so what is Parasite Eve? Well, let's dive right into the weirdness. Parasite Eve the game is actually a sequel to a Japanese novel and movie of the same name. How many games do you know that are a direct sequel of some other form of media? Not many, if any, that I can think of off the top of my head. Anyway, without spoiling too much of the story, in Parasite Eve you play as a rookie cop named Aya. The game begins with you going on a sweet date to the opera, where you are there to just relax and enjoy the show. But like any game, you can't expect that to last too long, and it doesn't. The main singer has some form of metamorphosis on stage, and starts lighting everyone in the crowd on fire with evidently just her brain power. However, like any good main character in a video game, Aya is unaffected due to reasons we don't know about at first, and it's now up to her to save the day. You make your way to the stage and you confront the bad lady, or Eve as she starts calling herself. And in the typical evil villain monologue that always happens, she explains that her mitochondria has evolved, and she is now the mitochondria controlling the body of the singer that she inhabits, and she is using her mitochondrial powers to change everyone else's mitochondria by lighting them on fire. And if you think I just said mitochondria way too much, then you need to strap in, because every other sentence in this video game, they say something about mitochondria. Anyway, like I said, I don't want to spoil too much of a 20-plus-year-old game, so I will just say that overall, the story is actually pretty good. Much better than I thought it was going to be at first, anyway. There's a ton of dialogue, however, and I mean a ton. Plus, it goes super deep into the whole mitochondria thing I was talking about, and the science behind it. So if that isn't your thing, it might turn you off a bit. Let's move straight on to graphics, and I would like to say that some games just age better than others. This isn't one of those games. PlayStation 1 3D polygons in general are usually pretty bad, and this is probably on the lower end of even that. That isn't to say the art design and all of that is bad though, because I really liked some of the character designs and the general feel that they were going for. Also, the FMV sections were all pretty cool looking. The exception to all of this would be that a lot of what they were trying to do with horror now kind of comes off as just weird. For example, I remember this rat transforming at the beginning of the game being scary as hell when I was a little kid, and now it's just like, eh. Plus, since the combat revolves around random encounters, that kind of takes away any chance of you being afraid to walk around a corner. Oh, and speaking of walking, this game easily has one of the worst and slowest walking animations I have ever seen in my entire life. I legitimately thought about doing a whole Aya walking montage here, just so you would get the picture, but I personally couldn't bear to deal with it anymore, so I cut it all out for my sake. Oh shit, evidently I forgot to cut it all out. Let's stop talking about the bad though and get to something I absolutely loved, and that is the combat system. It's a completely different take on the active time battle system that Square used a lot of around this time period. The differences though are that you aren't on one side of the screen with the enemies on the other, and you don't just take turns hitting each other. Instead, you control Aya the entire time and can run around the area freely, dodging enemy attacks and setting yourself up for your own attacks when your ATB gauge fills. Where it's a modern style of RPG, you use guns, so you need to position yourself in range of whatever gun you have so that you can fire on the enemy. You also have Parasite Enemy, which is just this game's magic basically, so nothing new there, but it also works the same way by running around freely. The system's so simple, yet so enjoyable. I absolutely loved it, and I felt myself not being upset every time a random battle popped, which is completely different from every other JRPG I've ever played. It was just a refreshing take on a turn-based style of battle system, and I would love to see something like this that has been expanded on. I guess the last major part of the game I want to talk about is the weird fusion opera music that I just didn't get. Or more accurately, I should say that I just didn't get the first 30 minutes of the game. And then about 2 hours into the game, I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And then about 5 hours into the game, I was like, this music is sweet. I was absolutely just loving it and bopping along to it. It's mainly just bass and drums with some, weird opera singing over top of it. I mean, other than to just say, hey, this game has some low-key pretty awesome music, I don't know what to say about it. It's pretty good and you should check it out. But what's my final thoughts? I mean, this series is all about looking at older games and deciding if they need to come to a current gen system in some form. So here's my opinion. I think this is the kind of series that just screams reboot to me. A horror RPG is not a genre that we see much of, and this one had a ton of promise and some amazing ideas. I wouldn't really want to see an exact remake because it also had its fair share of problems and quite a few big ones. More or less just a complete reboot that uses a lot of the same systems that were enjoyable in the game. But as everything I say on this channel, it is just my opinion, and sometimes my opinion can be wrong. Only sometimes though. I would love if you told me your thoughts down below on this game and any other games that you could think of that would be really good fit for this series. I would like to talk about some older games that could maybe come to current gen systems. Oh, and if you actually liked the video, consider subscribing and joining the amateur family. I'm coming up on 160 subs, which, if you've watched any other YouTube channel, may not sound like very much at all, but to me, it's a ton. I'm still in the stage where every time someone comments or subscribes or even likes, I get absolutely giddy, even though that's kind of weird to say on camera. But that's where I'm at. So yeah, if you liked this, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, do whatever. But as always, guys, I really appreciate you watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.